Good evening, my name is Gleb Antonov, and it's my second season of my show, and I'd like to tell you that my second season is going to be totally different from the first one, because you probably might have noticed that my first season I was making the scripts, I was writing every line and then learning word by word, and I was taking most of the information from academical sources, so it was interesting to work on the first season. However, I was kind of doing an actor job when everything is. I don't want to be an actor because everything is defined, structured. Every word that you need to say is precise, and you just need to have some emotions and have very good memory to remember long sentences. And it's not so much fun, because I would like to become a politician, and that's why I need to be able to speak up freely without any constraints of scenarios, and that's why today and probably all this season I'm not going to make scripts, and I'm just going to prepare topics for discussion, and then I'll be just talking freely, and it's not going to be perfect because I'm gonna make probably mistakes. I might forget some information. I may not make any jokes at all because I didn't prepare. However, nobody is laughing at my jokes anyway, so I don't have many subscribers. And the person who has a lot of subscribers is Jordan Peterson. It's a Canadian professor he's living in Toronto probably, and he's got 3 million subscribers. So, and he positions intellectual public figure who working for ideas of kind of enlightenment, at the same time, of course, making money, and it makes sense, of course. And so I was kind of thinking that probably this is the most intellectual person in Canada. I need to listen to him, because I don't know, maybe there are other people also. For me, it's most intellectual person. I need to make a review of what he's thinking, what he's saying, and same ideas, and that's why yesterday I watched intellectual debates between Professor Peterson and Professor Zizek. And the debates were 2.5 hours, and I watched the first 40 minutes, which was introductory part of Dr. Peterson, and it was actually interesting because he was saying really smart words, he was saying really smart ideas, and sometimes it was even taking me some time to realize what he trying to say, because I mean the idea was so complicated that it was taking me 40-50 seconds to read it several times and then try to understand. Then I was understanding, I was that's really smart idea, I was thinking. And it's actually, I can say it's really in total, in general, Professor Peterson is really nice marketing project, I would say, because he is nice looking and he is smart. And you probably might have noticed in this life that nice looking people, they not usually, in most of the cases, very smart, because they know that they can achieve everything just using appearance, and that's why they don't actually even read books. And that's why it's a nice combination when a good-looking person knows how to speak and knows, and that's why it was interesting for me to watch him. And I also liked his performance, his gestures, what he was saying, how he was saying, his intonations. It was very interesting for me, of course. However, let me tell you about the debates, and despite everything, I'd like to criticize Professor Peterson. And I think that in the scientific world, the scientists need to criticize each other viewpoints, because it's making better conditions for truth and for understanding for them and for other people. So that's why I think that criticizing is essential, and that's why I'd like to tell you why I think that Dr. Peterson wasn't making any sense yesterday in the first 40 minutes. And let me explain you, because let me give you some arguments. And let's imagine the whole venue is a large hall with lots of people, everything's fancy, expensive tickets, 3 people on the stage, and they discussing the nature of Marxism. So and Dr. Peterson is talking first, and he, for 40 minutes, he was mostly criticizing communism, and all of his judgment of this ideology was based, according to his words, to Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx. And let me tell you why Professor Peterson didn't even read this manifesto, and then he's making some scientific assumptions about this text. I don't understand. And I'm gonna explain you why today. And this manifesto is just like 5 pages, like commercial brochure written by Karl Marx to promote revolution, and of course it was for proletariat, for majority of people, so it wasn't even complicated ideas expressed, because he needed to explain it like to poorest levels of society of those days, and that's why his idea is pretty simple. And by listening to Professor Peterson, I can see that he is basing his opinion not on the manifesto, but probably he's basing his opinion on academical literature of other scientists, probably Western scientists who were criticizing Soviet Union communism. And the first misconception, and that's a problem, because Communist Manifesto by Marx was and I'm gonna tell you, like, starting from with the Dr. Peterson ended his speech with statistics. He was saying that with capitalism, poor layers of the population became much richer. They have now more resources during last like 20 years. The statistic of United Nations organization that is saying that people who didn't have anything have even in terms of $1 allowance for living per day, and that's why he was saying that capitalism is actually making poor people richer, and that's why capitalism is better than Marxism. And I'd like to tell Dr. Peterson that Karl Marx was writing his manifesto in the middle of 19th century, and at those times people like workers, they live in actually disastrous conditions across Europe, and Marx was mostly, of course, writing his manifesto for European workers who were living really poor, comparing to modern times, of course, and who were not even represented in political system of those times at all, even though it was majority. And that's why I don't understand why Dr. Peterson, because Karl Marx was probably assuming that might be technological revolution and advancement of computers, and it will result that people will start living. Probably he was assuming that. However, he was talking about Marxism from the point of view of 19th century. And I don't understand what it has to do with statistics of 21st century. So it's the problem. And the second problem, the second misconception, is that the initial topic for discussion was Marxism, and Peterson was talking about Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx. However, during his speech, he was giving a lot of examples why communism is bad, and he was giving examples of the Soviet communists. And it's totally different ideas, ideologies. And when Karl Marx was writing his postulates, he didn't even know Lenin or Bukharin or Trotsky or Stalin or Mikhail, and he didn't even know that some people in another part of the world will use his ideas and will use it really like invertly, because Karl Marx was saying totally different than Soviet communism. Actually, communists actually made of his ideas according to their interpretation. So, and it's really important in order to understand Marxism to distinguish Marxism written by Karl Marx and Marxism which is perceived in terms of communism. And let me give you an example of what I'm saying, because for example, Dr. Peterson is talking about antagonism of bourgeois and proletariat, and he's saying that communism is a terrible system because take a look at the so-called kulaks. And kulaks, not gulags, kulaks, they were like peasants living in villages, like small rural areas, who maybe in 40 years were able by hard work to have some sort of savings, some sort of security, some sort of cattle, and so they were small entrepreneurs of rural areas who had at least some sort of financial benefits of the activity compared to other people. And he was saying that the communists came and they took all of their possession, confiscated everything they had, because communists were saying that you kulaks, you are bourgeois and we are proletariat, so you can take all of your possessions by force. And he was saying that it's terrible because those people, they were kulaks. Peterson was saying the kulaks were made everything they had, and they didn't have much just by their own efforts, and it's stupid to confiscate their possessions only based on the different class. And in that case, I agree with what Dr. Peterson was saying. However, if we talk about Marxism, it says, the manifesto, it clearly says about Marx, perception of life in rural areas. And Marx, he didn't even know anything about kulaks, or about much probably that his ideas being interpreted differently, because he was saying that there are some peasants living in rural areas, however there is industrialization, so that's why rural areas will demolish, because all the people go to towns where the factories are, and that's why let's not even care much about peasants, because let's talk about cities and large industrial centers. And he was saying, not saying anything about peasants in terms of confiscating their small possessions, which were in Soviet, in early Soviet Union, probably there were not too many wealthy people, and communists needed to use their power at least to gain some benefits from a small group of people who might have had it, who were kulaks, and they just didn't have, they didn't have many people to rob, so that's why probably it was in Soviet Union. However, it's different. Marx perception of Marx and interpretation of Soviet communists, which were mostly tied to the cruel reality of those times, because it was 20th century, 1920s, and it was really difficult times in terms of human progress. Because so you can't say that Marxism is bad because some people in one particular country interpreted it the way that was very cruel. However, you can say that Marxism is not because the first misconception that probably doesn't make any sense of his speech in terms of Marxism, because mostly he was talking about Soviet Marxism and not the ideas of initial ideas of Marx. And this was the first example. And second, let me actually tell you about Marx's perception of bourgeois and proletariat antagonism. So he was saying that there are people who were rich, because they were born rich, and then the religious influence became less powerful, and that's why it led to French Revolution, and that feudal system was abolished by bourgeois system in the favor of bourgeois system, because they were more bourgeois than royal people. And he was saying, like feudal people, and he was saying that the same way the next revolution is supposed to be when proletariat will seize the resources from bourgeois for their benefits. Why? Because way more proletariat, way more people than bourgeois. So they have to take all of their resources for them. And he was saying about class struggle from the perspective that a proletarian revolution will abolish any class differentiation. And it's kind of complicated idea. He was saying that when proletarian will come to power, they will seize all the resources, and that will abolish traditional system of exploitation, and that will abolish the basis for existence of class differentiation. And even though proletarian, it will abolish proletarian superiority, because there is no basis for existing of a class differentiation. And that's what he was saying. And the next idea by Dr. Peterson, he was saying that according to communists, let's take all of the royals, feudal owners, and let's substitute a small group of people, a small group of proletariat. And it's not one set how those people at power from proletariat are going to be elected somehow. Why exactly those people? Why they're good or bad? And that they then have to somehow cope with the huge economic system of the whole country, and it is not making any sense. And I kind of agree, because in Soviet Union people were probably greedy to power, so that's why there was just a small group of people who were at power and they were trying to make all the decisions. However, in Marxist theory, in his Communist Manifesto, he was saying that proletarian revolution is when majority of the country will come to power. Not like some people, however, all of the people, and they will seize in the hands of state all the resources from capitalists, and by that means will boost the economic progress and manufacturing growth. And so Marx is saying that it was like the first revolution of majority of population. So, and that's why. And next, Dr. Peterson was saying about the profits, and he was saying that in Soviet Union profit was considered to be a theft, and he didn't understand how come it's possible that because the profit is the main source for any business to grow, so how you can exclude profit from economic system because it has no incentives, it doesn't make any sense. And it was kind of making sense, his words, because in Soviet Union probably communists didn't like competition much, and they didn't like middle and small business, so that's why there was actually a criminal prosecution for so-called speculation, which was profit. It was true, okay. However, in Marxist Communist Manifesto, it's said that let's abolish free market system, and let's abolish demand and supply at all, because majority of population who come to power can set their own prices and can set their own quantity of production. So that's what he meant by abolition profits, the whole free market system, because he was making an utopia. And next, I'd like to tell you about. So that was the main ideas that I would probably say that Professor Peterson doesn't realize the nature of Marxism, and he's mostly referencing to Soviet Marxism, which was a very terrible interpretation. However, if you want to talk about progress, you want to talk about philosophical concepts, let's talk about original Marxism ideas, which is very clear and just 5 pages long. So And next, I'd like to tell you about what I was probably surprised that in the beginning of those debates, the presenter, he was talking about Professor Peterson. He was saying about his academical works, about the books, about the subscribers, everything. And he said that Dr. Peterson was influenced by Dostoevsky and Nietzsche, and it's not like he probably even influenced. However, for some reasons he mentioned such names among people who somehow make probably look smarter. However, I don't understand why a person who is related to science and academic work can relate to Dostoevsky and Nietzsche, because Dostoevsky was all about religion, about slavery, and how come any scientific person can even talk about him, like reference to his ideas or words? It doesn't make any sense for me. And Dostoevsky was writing like in 42, I don't know the century he was living, how it was like long time ago, and he was just describing some reality of his time, and it's not even scientific work. It's just I don't understand. And the next Nietzsche, he was saying about ideas of racial supremacy, and he was saying that people with disabilities are worse than people that have no disabilities, and I don't understand how can anybody refer to those people when I don't understand why Dr. Peterson doesn't refer to Lamarck or Newton or Einstein or Darwin, and why he is. And actually, if to return to the topic of communism was saying that all the proletariat of all countries, all races need to unite, because there is no race. It doesn't make sense to divide people in race. We all workers, we are all proletariat. We need to unite to fight injustice. And that's what he was saying. And actually, it was saying, even though it was like just 5 pages, it's saying a lot of interesting things about, for example, Marx's views on education or culture or family or feminism. And that's why I probably already done for today. So that's pretty much everything what I wanted to say, and I think it's really interesting format actually. So since now on, I'm gonna make episodes only without script and just saying general ideas and trying to explain you. And I hope that it's interesting. And next episodes, I plan to tell you more about communism and more about intellectual debate. And I'm gonna continue watching, continue to review. And most likely I will make a review of debates in the United States between Trump and Biden today, and I'm probably going to say what I'm thinking. Alright, thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.